Greetings. The following video is a shorter version of a previous upload, to which I will add an additional shorter video before it plays. Before I drop in that audio, I will say that I made the longer video partly out of frustration. The original version, which was later remade into that one, and which was intended to provide the story of my journey of how I got to the point of hating dogs so much I make videos about it, was intended for fellow dog-averse individuals. But time and again I get asked why I hate dogs, and sometimes even when I give enough reasons, or when I provide all the context needed for someone to understand why, I am still asked this question, or I am still met with opposition. The purpose of this is to set the record straight for the final time. But if you want the abridged version, I hate dogs because they are and continue to be a growing menace that's largely unrecognized across the world. Although this might be more true in many developed countries and developing nutter countries such as India, where there's increasing support for dogs extending into its legal system in many parts, despite what a plague dogs are there. I hate dogs because there is nothing special or likable about them, yet people just about everywhere seem to be obsessed with them. I hate dogs because their behavior is incredibly off-putting. I hate dogs because of the way they mindlessly bark and threaten anyone who comes within 30 meters of them, particularly when they are behind a fenced-in area and when they are in vehicles driving past. I hate dogs because of their odor and intrusiveness, and because of the way they attack without provocation on a daily basis all across the world. I hate dogs because they are the source of so many otherwise completely avoidable social and environmental problems. I hate them because they are polluting sidewalks and green spaces everywhere, and because they are invading parks and various indoor spaces as well. I hate them because they reduce quality of life in any neighborhood infested with them to complete and utter dog shit. Literally and figuratively. Any park that effectively becomes a dog park is likewise reduced to a complete shambles. I also hate them because of the effect they seem to have on those who gravitate towards them, and because despite my lack of interest in them, they were always pushed onto me anyway, by people infatuated with them who can't pick up on social cues. I hate them because now I have grown to despise them, and they are still shoved in my face by society as a whole, social media, films and shows, and all the rest of it. I hate them because their presence means I must avoid certain places, which often includes the homes of family members. I hate them because several of them have either bitten me without provocation or have attempted to. And I hate them because they are the sole reason I walk around with self-defense tools. I hate them because a couple have tried to kill me, and because dozens and dozens of them all throughout my life have barked incessantly and aggressively, either in an area I passed through or directly at me, simply for walking by them. I hate them because they are mindlessly aggressive, aberrant and dysfunctional mutants without a single redeeming quality. Is that enough reasons? And as I will briefly outline before the original video plays, no, I was not bitten by a dog as a child. However, I can't imagine why people would view this as a reason to dismiss my distrust and dislike, or outright hatred, of dogs, as this would be a perfectly good reason to reject their presence in society. And a final note. The incidents described are not the only negative interactions I've had with dogs. I left quite a bit out of it. And lastly, I did actually forget to mention in that video that I did personally know someone who has been attacked by someone's pit bull some years ago.
Greetings. I got a question earlier today which I'd like to answer.
Legit question? Why such personal hatred for dogs? Bad experiences as a kid?
I don't hate dogs on a personal level, as dogs are not persons. However, I do have personal reasons for disliking them, in addition to various reasons which have nothing to do with me for rejecting their presence in society. To answer the second part of your question, I had a dog as a child. I was never bitten by a dog when I was young, if that's what you're expecting me to say. The short answer is that I feel dog ownership should just fall out of favor completely at some point. Why? Because it's archaic and harmful, and essentially a scam to enrich companies and corporations at the expense of the general public. The longer answer is that I have made multiple videos thoroughly outlining reasons that would answer such a question, and I am happy to point you to them if you are genuinely interested. Greetings. A few questions I get a lot. Oh my God, do you really hate dogs? How can you hate dogs? Why do you hate dogs? Is this satire? Yes, I really do. And no, it's not satire. I don't think you understand what satire means. What is this supposed to be a satire of? All you have to do to understand why is watch almost any of my videos. I have over 200 videos, and most of them specifically address that issue, or they provide the information you seek. For example, videos about annoying or horrible things dogs do, videos literally titled Why I Hate Dogs, or How I Became Anti-Dog. But here's the thing. First of all, I wasn't born a dog hater. I was made into one, and it wasn't even something that happened to me from one day to the next. It was a fairly gradual process. Although it didn't take long, after experiencing many dog-related problems within a relatively short span of time, for me to put two and two together. No one randomly wakes up and decides on a whim to just start hating dogs. That's never how it happens. I don't have random, inexplicable vitriol towards dogs or any living creature. Speaking of other living creatures, this is something I should briefly address before presenting my full story. Or at least, most of it. I love animals. Just not dogs. I'm only talking about dogs, not animals in general, which I have nothing against. Most animals have an instinct to keep their distance from humans, and I also think we should respect that. That is one reason I do not endorse pet ownership, just in general. But that is beyond the scope of this video, and here's the thing. My content would not exist if dogs and dog culture weren't such a pervasive, all-corrupting social bane. Now, maybe 20 years ago, this statement would have seemed strange, which is not to say dog culture wasn't a problem back then. But today dogs are unavoidable, and dog culture is inescapable. Countless demonstrable and observable examples of which I'll provide a few. Dogs increasingly brought to various public locations they've no business being. Dognut ideologues spamming social media with dog-related content, even when it's completely off topic. People rapidly adopting the insane cannibalistic philosophy that dogs are more valuable than their own species, to include their own offspring. Dog attacks being a regular occurrence that's frequently downplayed. Dog barking becoming ever more prevalent, even in nicer neighborhoods. Dog droppings and urine everywhere, and the fact a significant percentage of bacteria in water supplies comes from dog feces. People who don't even own or want dogs, but who are sympathizers, lending support to this craze by pretending those critical of it are the problem. Dogs being a defective selling item that results in more needless deaths and injuries to children and humans in general than any other product on the market. We generally hold humans to higher standards than dogs. We don't allow them to assault people, disturb their peaceful existence, wreck their property, terrorize their neighborhoods, or engage in open defecation and urination. All of these are things dogs regularly get a pass to do. These are things dog owners do to others, through the agency of their pet of choice. Dogs have attacked me unprovoked on multiple occasions. One of them almost ended my life. Another time, a huge and evil-looking pit bull held back only by its owner was charging at me within the confines of its leash to maul me. I've been unable to purchase properties because of how bad the barking is there. One house I looked at, it was so bad that you wouldn't be able to step out into your own yard without this one dog immediately starting up with a round of barking. I've lived in places where I've had to avoid entire streets on foot because of the raging monsters behind easily circumventable fences there. Loose, free-roaming dogs have only increased over time, and dogs are inescapable. I see dog droppings everywhere. Dog waste objectively contaminates water sources, soil, and groundwater. It's a scientific fact. I have videos on this, namely, Anti-Dog Manifesto with citations. Now, if it were like it was in the 90s or before, perhaps I'd never have become anti-dog. Then again, we may have to go back further, back to a time when dogs were far more rare and less of a problem. But let's keep in mind that at least one book on the ills of dog ownership was written in 1978. That book is titled The Dog Crisis by author Iris Nowell. But dog culture, particularly with these more recent generations and how they regard these creatures, has gotten a lot worse and more pernicious within the last 20 years or so. It's observable to anyone who isn't even paying attention, as I wasn't. I never set out to hate dogs and actually used to be relatively indifferent to them, until countless times of dogs ruining things for me. And I'm far from the only one this trend has had such an impact on. This is not only about me. This is our story.
I still remember the first time a dog bit me. This is exactly how it happened. I was stepping outside of a coffee shop when, out of nowhere, some clueless dog nutter's awful little rat dog bit me hard on the ankle. This attack came out of nowhere. It was the last thing I expected to experience in this scenario, stepping outside of a store I frequent. Now keep in mind that what I wanted to do and what I actually did are two completely different things. But everything inside me was screaming to kick the ever-living crap out of this piece of shit, pea-brained mutant that just bit me simply because it saw me. The owner wasn't apologetic in the slightest, and I've since come to know that this is a typical attitude among dog owners. They don't even see it as a big deal when their legal monsters aggress against you. And yes, it was a small dog. So what? It still shouldn't have bitten anyone. Its bite was quite painful, and a rather shocking sensation, especially considering the fact that I hadn't anticipated getting bitten by something. And while I didn't concern myself with this to the point of going to a clinic, I did have the slight worry over rabies in my head, which is always a concern with dog attacks. I just told myself that because the little turd is someone's pet, it is probably vaccinated against rabies. But this is not something anyone should ever have to deal with. In typical entitled dog nutter fashion, the woman with the ugly living teddy bear she feels the need to drag around to public shops had the dog on way too long a leash. And this is not the only time a small dog on too long a leash bit me. But I also remember the first time I was nearly mauled by much larger dogs. Off the top of my head, I can recall at least 3 different times when an encounter with a dog very well could have resulted in my death or hospitalization, and I've had many close calls. The first close call I had was actually many years ago. I had gone down into the dry Relito River Wash in Arizona, where I lived at the time, to get some exercise. Before getting too far along, I spotted 2 very large, very menacing-looking, and very much on the loose dogs. I do not recall what kind they were exactly, but one of them was unmistakably some pit mix. They were both ugly, vicious-looking, and muscular dogs. The sight of these 2 dogs, particularly out in the open, did not look like anything any sane person would ever want to see. In an instant, and without thinking, I went into a fight-or-flight mode and opted for the latter. I fled. Thankfully, I was close enough to the rocky downhill embankment I'd carefully scaled minutes ago that I was able to quickly close the distance between this singular exit and the unexpected predators. In short, I was able to escape unscathed. I ran right up the steep embankment and got the hell out of Dodge. While some dogs can actually jump fairly high and even climb certain surfaces, these 2 were bound to the sandy bottom. However, the dogs continued to bark in my general direction long after I'd left the area.
Now it should be noted that even after these incidents, and a couple others, I still did not go around advocating for the removal of dogs from society. I definitely questioned dog ownership, and thought to myself that at least some dogs shouldn't exist, or should be heavily regulated, but I mostly just went on with my life. I viewed these incidents in isolation, and probably chalked it up to, quote, bad owners, but that is a mistake. So keep in mind that the incidents I just described, and others, happened more than 10 years ago. It wasn't even until late 2021 or early to mid-2022, if memory serves, that I arrived at the point where I have just had it with dogs.
A more recent incident that served as the first major wake-up call, and which got me quickly starting to think dogs just shouldn't exist, is one where I was nearly killed by a random mutt on the street. This dog saw me riding my bike and decided to try to give chase. And then, when it got close enough, it went to bite onto my leg. There was no sidewalk there, and I was trapped between this random mutt and the traffic-laden street on the other side of me. I had to swerve to avoid having the dog's jaws clamp onto me, almost killing myself in traffic, actually. A driver had to swerve to avoid hitting me, and I got a honk. All because some random piece of crap street mutt acted on its prey drive and started chasing me for no good reason. There's at least one story in recent memory where a teenager was actually killed by a car while running away from a pit bull that started chasing him on the streets. Thankfully, the shit bull was also killed by the same car. so this sort of thing is not entirely unheard of. It was within 6 months of this incident I just detailed, and a couple of others involving close calls with large, aggressive dogs in the same small town, that I became full anti-dog.
Now, being nearly killed on at least one occasion, and realizing how shockingly prevalent dog attacks in general are, is enough to do it. However, there is much more. Dogs have ruined outings for me, and people I know, and they have made it impossible to sit outdoors in people's own backyards due to their incessant yapping and barking. I have gone to many houses where the putrid stench of these foul beasts has caused me to leave. People with dogs, and particularly larger ones, don't seem to realize how strongly their dogs smell, and how terrible that odor is. It seeps into fabrics and furniture and permeates the air everywhere. You literally can't breathe. It is beyond offensive. It is an assault on the senses. I've dated women with tiny, annoying, yapping dogs that they for some reason choose to waste time and resources on. In one particular relationship like this, I was dating a woman for a brief period of time. The dog was actually the root cause of our breakup. So she had this little white dog that looked kind of like a cross between a Yorkie and one of those pointless small dogs that just look like a dirty mop. At the start of our relationship, she would come over to my apartment and sometimes spend the night. The first time she came over, she at least asked me if she could bring her dog, and I said sure. Now keep in mind, this was, again, several years ago. I didn't hate dogs, although that was mostly because I'd had almost no contact with them. Although, in hindsight, I really should have been against them the way I am now, because the few experiences I had with them up to that point were ones like the one where I was chased out of a river wash, and the ones where I was bitten, without provocation of course, by two shitty little dogs on too long a leash in 2 different states. Anyway, I hated interacting with that dog and having it around. She didn't even know how to walk it. She would just let the dog tear off in any direction, getting in my way and hers and pulling to one side or the other. I actually did a better job of walking this dog than she did. I basically taught her how to keep control of the thing, and I wasn't even a dog person. Not by any stretch of the imagination. See? Just because I didn't hate dogs the way I do now, doesn't mean I ever really liked them either, except perhaps for when I was a child. I did have a dog growing up, actually, however it was an outdoor dog, which was regarded as a pet, and not a human or a family member.